Hello, Chattanooga. You're listening to all new Nooga Radio, noogaradio.com, here on 92.7 FM. Clutch with Keon Rose is the show. Thank you for joining me today. Did you enjoy the games yesterday? I think you enjoyed one of those games, right? The Jags-Patriots game was actually a good game, although it ended exactly how you thought it was going to end, with ultimately the Patriots coming back from double digits down in the fourth quarter. Tom Brady going back to another Super Bowl. 10 Super Bowls for the Patriots now. 10 Super Bowl appearances, which is the most by anyone ever. Yeah, that team's scary, right? And it's scary because of how long they've been able to do this. The quarterback's the same. The head coach is the same. And that's about it, right? Like the offensive line changes. Defense changes. Right? Guys that were on that defense when they won their first Super Bowl, Mike Vrabel, are now coaches in the league. I mean, that's scary how long they've been able to do this, right? Like there's never been a run like this in sports. Am I wrong on this? Because I don't think I am. It's a little horrific how long they've been able to do this. Both the fact that the quarterback is 40, that the coach is more or less in control of his locker room to the point where the running backs don't seem to matter. The wide receivers don't seem to matter. The offensive line, defensive line, they all are interchangeable, right? They lose Gronk in the game, and they still win the game, which we all know how important it is to have a guy like Gronk because we saw it earlier in the playoffs, the Kansas City Chiefs. They lose Travis Kelce in the middle of the game, and the Titans come back and beat them. They're down 18, and the Titans come back and beat them because they didn't have Kelce. Right? And Kelce is the next closest human being in that sport to Rob Gronkowski. Both in position, in shape, in size, quite frankly, personality. Like they're about as close to as of people you can get, right? The Chiefs lose Kelce and they've got nothing. The Patriots lose Gronk. Okay. We'll just figure out how to beat you with Brandon Cooks. I mean, they're not really overly fazed by this stuff. And I felt really bad for the Jags, too, because I thought the Jaguars played a great game. I thought Blake Bortles and Tony Romo mentioned this in the game. I thought Blake Bortles played the best game of his whole career that day when they absolutely needed. I mean, they could have gotten more from him. I think he could have done more. But he absolutely played the best game that Blake Bortles is capable of playing. You couldn't have asked the guy to do more, right? Now, had he been capable of doing more, I think they win that game, but he's not. He played about as good, as clean a football game as you could ask for. He didn't turn the ball over. He made big plays when he had to. But this is what I'm talking about when I tell you that the New England Patriots are the bad guys in any movie. And Tom Brady's the chief villain because he's a guy you can't be. Oh, what was the quote? Someone had a great quote about Tom Brady over the weekend. You can't be conservative when you're trying to get rid of the bad guy in a movie, right? And you've seen those movies where he's dead and then he comes back. Turns out he's not dead. And then he comes back again and he just keeps coming back. Right? And you're like, what is with this guy? Right? Like one of my favorite movies last year was the movie Baby Driver. And a lot of people like that movie. And John Hamm plays the bad guy in that movie. And trying to kill John Hamm's character in that movie, he shows up like 3 times at the end of the movie when you think he's dead. He's not dead. Absolutely not dead. You just can't kill. He's like the Terminator, right? Like when you think you've killed the Terminator, oh, look, no, actually, I'm a machine and I just keep coming. That's Tom Brady. That's the Patriots. They're back in this thing for the 10th time. No one's ever done that. Like, this is a historic run. Absolutely. And on the other side, we get a little bit of deja vu because the Eagles get to go back to this thing too. And they get to play the Patriots for the first time in 12 years in the Super Bowl. Last time the Patriots and the Eagles were together in a Super Bowl, Donovan McNabb was the quarterback of the Eagles. Andy Reid was the head coach. And again, this just kind of all exaggerates how ridiculous what the Patriots are doing absolutely is. Like the Eagles are not even close to the same team that they were when they went to the Super Bowl against the Patriots over a decade ago. This is a different team, different coach, but I will give the Eagles something here, which is that they really found something in Doug Peterson as a head coach. Because Doug Peterson put on a clinic yesterday as to how it is that you outwit brilliant defensive minds. Mike Zimmer is one of the best defensive minds in the NFL. The number one defense in the league. And Doug Peterson was one step ahead of Mike Zimmer all night, and his quarterback was Nick Foles. And I don't have a problem with Nick Foles. But he was one step ahead of Mike Zimmer, and his quarterback was Nick Foles, right? Like, he wasn't one step ahead, and his quarterback was Roethlisberger or Rivers or any of these guys that you would tab as elite, right? He's one step ahead. His quarterback is his backup quarterback. His quarterback is Nick Foles. And I like Nick Foles enough, right? Even though about a month and a half ago, I did rip Nick Foles. But not personally. Like, I don't have a problem with Nick Foles personally. But, you know, this is how it is on Twitter. Stupid people just hop in your mentions and say stuff on Twitter. And so people on Twitter were saying, and it is the craziest thing, that the Eagles were just as fine with Nick Foles as they would have been with Carson Wentz. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you no on that one. And I know he played a great game yesterday against the number one defense in the league. I will eat a little bit of crow, a small amount, because, yeah, Nick Foles performed better than I thought that he could. But no, Nick Foles is not Carson Wentz. Right now, Nick Foles played a great game yesterday. And one thing that Nick Foles did that the Eagles have been good on all year, because the Eagles are actually, I think they're either number one or number two in third down conversions. I have to go back and check that, but I think third down conversions, the Eagles are definitely top three in the league. I saw that before the game yesterday. And part of the reason why the Eagles have been so good on third downs is, hey, Carson Wentz has that escapability. Nobody can figure out how to stop Carson Wentz from using his feet to beat you on a third down. No one figured it out all year. I guess the Rams figured it out when they crushed his leg, but no one else figured it out strategically. No one figured out how to do it in the game. Right? The poor Redskins were sacrificed on the altar of, we can't figure out how to stop Carson Wentz when it's 3rd and 8 and he runs away, when half of our team is on top of him and he squirts out of the pile. Like, what do you do after that? Like, there's nothing you can do. And so I thought that the Eagles would struggle on third downs without that escapability. But give Doug Peterson a lot of credit, because on third downs, he got the ball out of Nick Foles' hands quickly. He just 3-step drops, 5-step drops. Foot hits the ground, the ball comes out. And for whatever reason, and I'm not sure why, the Vikings didn't look prepared for that. I don't know if they didn't see that coming, but they got sliced up. And it was one of those things where once the Eagles got out to that big lead, it didn't look good. It didn't look like the Vikings ever had a chance, right? I stopped watching that game in the middle of the third quarter. I wanted to watch a movie. And once it became very apparent in which direction this game was going, I was like, okay, I don't think that the Vikings are going to have two miracles in them back-to-back weeks. I started watching The Usual Suspects because that's a great movie. One of my favorite movies. So I watched that instead. I was getting miserable. Plus, it's hard to sit there and watch the Eagles succeed. Ugh. And I have a rule, which is that I don't sit down and watch bad football. And the Vikings were playing bad football. And this is the thing, by the way, that the Vikings were afraid of with Case Keenum all year, right? Like, and everyone kind of had their eye out on Case Keenum for this, which was when does Case Keenum, the journeyman, show up? Right? Because there's a reason why Case Keenum bounced around the league forever. He's got obvious weaknesses as a quarterback. I think this season he displayed a lot of his strengths, but he's got obvious weaknesses. And we didn't really see them this year. For whatever reason, he kept them under wraps. For whatever reason, they didn't become glaring problems. And they usually do show up. When does that side of Keenum show up? Oh, well, it showed up. Now, it's not all his fault. I think that what's being completely underestimated here, and I think what's worth looking into heading into the Super Bowl, is defensively how good the Eagles can be. Because the Eagles defensively, especially along that defensive line, like, my God, how horrifying is that? That defensive line is a strong, powerful defensive line. They get to the quarterback. And I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to get to Brady in the Super Bowl. Absolutely. They're going to get their hands on him, and they're going to do some damage. And we've seen what you can do if you can get your hands on Tom Brady early in a football game, especially in the Super Bowl. We've seen the Giants do it twice. What could the Eagles do to Tom Brady? Like, that to me is an interesting storyline. Because what they were able to do to Case Keenum, I think part of it is it's easy to say, well, I don't know how much the Vikings wanted it. I think the Vikings wanted it a lot. I think their football team is not designed to play from behind. I don't think that you have Case Keenum as your quarterback and ask that guy to come from behind. And when the Vikings were in control of that football game, was very, very early, very briefly, on the opening drive, they ran the ball down the down the Eagles' throats. And it looked like this was their game. But they had the back-to-back turnovers that resulted in direct points for Philadelphia. And once you put them in a position where they're 2 possessions behind, they're not designed to come back. That's not what they do, which stinks, right? Because they've got Stephon Diggs, who's a big-time, big-play receiver. You think you take those shots down the field and see how it goes. You've got Diggs, you've got Thielen, right? So you've got guys that can make plays in the secondary, take the shots down the field, but that's not the design of their football team. It hasn't been all year, and so to suddenly expect it to be that, not the right time, I don't think. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose on all new Nooga Radio, noogaradio.com here on 92.7 FM. And so, yeah, that was one of those games where I was surprised at how bad it got for the Vikings so quickly. But once they fell behind, I was not surprised by the fact that they couldn't do anything about it. They just got caught in one of those negative loops where the further behind they fell, the further away from their game that they were, right? Like teams that we've seen come back in the playoffs, what do they do well? Well, they throw the ball well. Vikings are a running team. I mean, you can say everything you want to about, McKinnon and those guys and say, well, those aren't necessarily the premier rushers in the league, but the Vikings want to run the football. That is what they want to do. And once they were put in a position where they couldn't do that, it was lights out for them, right? And you could look at a situation too. You could even look at that Patriots-Jaguars game and look at the Jaguars and go, why couldn't the Jaguars beat the Patriots? There really wasn't any reason why not. Like I said before, Blake Bortles plays the best game of his career. How is it that they didn't win? Well, penalties, right? Like the Jaguars had more penalties than the Patriots did. The Patriots had 1 penalty for, I believe, 9 yards. The Jaguars had 6 penalties for 98. Right? They had a pass interference. They had a face mask. They had a delay of game that caused them to move out of field goal range early in the game. They ended up giving the ball back to the Patriots, who scored that touchdown in the first half to keep them in the game, right? The Vikings don't, the Jaguars don't have that delay of game early. And the Patriots probably don't win. Because now you're asking them to come back not from down 10, but down 17. Maybe they don't win that game. Right? It's tough to tell. But the penalties, that will kill you. That will almost always kill you, and it will most certainly kill you against the Patriots. Right? So you just look at a couple of teams that didn't do themselves any favors, right? Like the Vikings didn't do themselves any favors by being a one-dimensional football team. Because once they fall behind, there's nothing they can do. And then, of course, you got to give credit to Doug Peterson and his staff for being able to outwit Mike Zimmer all night, right? Because he had to be doing something. You know what the Eagles were on third down in that game? The Eagles were 12 of 13 on third downs. Now, I find it hard to believe that a Mike Zimmer defense has 13 third downs against the team and only stops them once. I mean, I give all the credit in the world to Doug Peterson on that one. You have to. But by being the kind of football team that can't take shots down the field, that can't destroy people passing the football, when you fall behind by 14 points, because that's one touchdown out of halftime and you're in the game. Right? Like that's one defensive stop. You score on the next possession and the score is 21-14 and that's a doable game. And we didn't get that ever because the Vikings were one-dimensional. And we never got to see all the hard work pay off for Jacksonville because penalties. You can't commit the kinds of penalties that they did, like especially a delay of game. Like there's no excuse for delay of game, especially in the first half, man. Call the timeout if you have to. Like there's no reason to have a delay of game. And that really, like if you want to boil down that game to one play that killed them, that's the play. That's the play. Right? And if you want to boil down the Eagles-Vikings game to one play, well, I can't boil it down to one play, but I can boil it down to two, which is that there were 2 sack fumbles on Case Keenum on back-to-back possessions. Right? He's holding onto the ball too long. You have these routes developing downfield, and you're in control of the game. You're running the ball well. The deep passing game, that's not necessarily your game. A lot of credit, by the way, to Derek Barnett, young man, the rookie out of the University of Tennessee, causing at least one of those sack fumbles. That guy's a good power rusher. Like, it is fun to watch that guy just bull rush people. He doesn't have like a ton of moves. You know, like there's some guys that are just technically great as defensive linemen. And he is. But he's got the power, though, man. When he hits a guard, I don't know that there is any stopping that guy if he really wants to get to the quarterback. I'm not sure. Right? Like I'm a little worried about the Patriots. But we have a rematch. We have a rematch of the Super Bowl in 2005 is when the Eagles and the Patriots last played in the Super Bowl, and Terrell Owens was the only Philadelphia Eagle that decided to show up to that game. Oh, and Donovan McNabb threw up on the opening drive. You remember that? Because I remember that. I will never forget that. I couldn't believe what I was watching on my TV. Donovan McNabb called a timeout, ripped off his helmet, and vomited on the field. And then they went straight to a commercial break on the Eagles' opening drive of that game. Yeah, I don't think that the Eagles were ready for that. And now we're watching a game in which Nick Foles is the quarterback of this football team. Are the Eagles ready for this? I think that's a very valid question to ask. It's a very, very good question because I don't have the answer to it. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose on all new Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com here on 92.7 FM. A lot of coaches found new homes in the league. And the Tennessee Titans have found their man, and they're looking for an offensive coordinator. I'll clue you in on all of that next on Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
2 more gone from Bradley County Sheriff's Office. The Director of Administration, Arnold Botts, and the Chief Deputy, Brian Smith, have resigned from the Bradley County Sheriff's Office, according to WRCB, but not to run against Sheriff Eric Watson, unlike Captain Steve Lawson, who announced plans to run. The two apparently left on good terms. Great news in Copper Hill. The boil water advisory has been lifted. The boil water advisory had been in effect since the 6th when the water main break in Georgia knocked out the clean water supply for the small Tennessee town, making the new year not so happy. Officials with the town say they regret this has happened so many times. 3 years after the deadly crash, the Benjamin Brewer trial is set to begin. Back in June of 2015, Brewer was accused of ramming his semi into stopped traffic on I-75, killing 6. Val St. John, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 News now.
Chattanooga Morning News with Russ and Val. Weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. on Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM.
Oh, man, rush. I've got to get stuff for the party. Where can I go that's going to give me a wide selection of beer, wines, and spirits? Oh, I got it. I'll go to Harry's Wine and Spirits, Signal Mountain. Maybe East Brainerd Wine and Spirits in East Brainerd. I could go to Riley's Wines and Spirits in Hickson. Wow, look at the huge selection in here. Look at these great prices. Amazing. Oh, yeah. I'm going to find something for my lady, too. I'm going to make this party a success.
Make your party a success when you stop in at Harry's Wine and Spirits in Signal Mountain, East Brainerd Wine and Spirits in East Brainerd, and Riley's Wine and Spirits in Hickson. An automated nuclear missile defense system has suddenly entered into launch mode, and you are the only one who can stop it. Escape Experience Chattanooga. Your team has just been infected with a deadly virus. Your only hope? There, in an abandoned farmhouse. Escape Experience Chattanooga. Handcuffed in a maximum security prison, you have an hour to flee. Escape Experience Chattanooga. These escape scenarios and more at Chattanooga's best escape room game and team building platform. Call now. Slots are limited. Register online at escapeexperience.com/Chattanooga. Escape Experience Chattanooga. If your computer is running slow, if you have viruses, if someone called you asking to get into your computer, just say no. If a screen pops up on your computer saying your data is going to be deleted and you have to call this number, don't call it. You need to call Affordable Computers. You wouldn't invite a stranger to come into your house to look at all your books and records, so why would you invite someone to look at your records on your computer? With one wrong click of the mouse, you could be allowing access into your entire system. At Affordable Computers, we can stop them now. Don't be fooled by scammers and pop-ups that tell you you must call this number or your hard drive is going to be deleted. You need to call Affordable Computers. Call Affordable Computers now. Microsoft is never going to call you. Microsoft is never going to ask you to call them. If you see that on your screen, you are being scammed. Stop and call Affordable Computers. 423-499-1975. That's 423-499-1975. In Fort Oglethorpe, call 706-858-5888. That's 706-858-5888. Affordable Computers.
95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM.
Expect fair to partly cloudy skies to continue through your nighttime. Cold overnight, lows mid and upper 20s. Now for your Wednesday, look for some sunshine with a breeze out of the north, though. Light cold, highs up around 40 with more mainly dry and cold weather expected through Friday. Celebrate the new year with Dixieland Fireworks, locally owned with the largest selection around. A Black Hat dealer with the lowest prices in Dixie. Dixieland Fireworks, just off I-75 on Ringgold Road, East Ridge. And I'm Storm Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Hoare.
Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News. NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogaRadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
You're listening to all new Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com. Here on 92.7 FM. The show is Clutch with Keon Rose. I'm Keon Rose. Thank you for joining me today. So I gave you all of my thoughts on the championship games over the weekend. One game was good. The other game was a snooze fest. But there are really good reasons why the teams that lost, right? The Vikings could not escape the downward spiral of turnovers as Case Keenum showed you all of the things that Case Keenum can be, right? Which is sometimes he's a little unaware. He's a little slow to get rid of the football. Sometimes he doesn't make the best decisions, especially when he's under pressure. And there are moments when you need your quarterback to step up and make a play. And he can't always make those because he's a normal person, right? Like, this is not a knock on Case Keenum. When a quarterback can't step up and necessarily make big-time plays in big-time moments, I look at that quarterback and I go, is this person one of those superhuman weirdos, or is this guy a normal person? Because Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, these are all a bunch of superhuman weirdos. And then, you got your normal people. They certainly play quarterback better than me and you, but they're playing at a high level, but they're human. Right? Case Keenum is a human, and he did human things yesterday, and they lost. Right? And Nick Foles, by the way, played like one of the superhuman weirdos, in fairness. Again, you got to give the devil his due. I did take down Nick Foles on many occasions. I don't believe that Nick Foles is a great quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback. If you put him in a good system, he does well. That's most quarterbacks, by the way. But I don't think that Nick Foles is this transcendence talent that we've been missing out on. And by the way, I have a wonderful stat here. If I can find it again, because that'll just be fun. Because there are a number of quarterbacks who have found reasonable success in the league, and I think that this is absolutely funny to me. Nick Foles, Brian Hoyer, Kirk Cousins. Yes. All of these quarterbacks were on the same team at Michigan State. Nick Foles and Brian Hoyer will be in the Super Bowl, and Kirk Cousins is about to be a very rich man, which I would argue is the next best thing from winning a Super Bowl. From being in a Super Bowl is where Kirk Cousins is, where Kirk Cousins is rich. Right? Because he's been franchise tagged 2 years in a row, so he's rich, and he's about to get paid a lot of money by some team to be their quarterback. Right? He's gonna be fine. I don't feel bad for Kirk Cousins at all. And Brian Hoyer is backing up Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, which that's a nice place to get your free Super Bowl ring for doing not anything. Because you know that Tom Brady's not giving up his starting job, right? Like, if Tom Brady's throwing arm falls off, he's going to throw with his left arm. And if his left arm falls off, he's going to throw the ball downfield with his teeth. I don't know, but he's not giving it up. Brian Hoyer's not doing anything. And Nick Foles, he's there. He made it. He's in the Super Bowl. He's the starter because Carson Wentz cannot go. So maybe if you're Mike D'Antonio, you use that at Michigan State as your fuel for recruiting quarterbacks. Like, I can get you paid in the league. You do the John Calipari pitch to quarterbacks. I'm just saying. I'm tossing it out. That's some free advice, D'Antonio. I'm looking out for you, man. So we've got coaches moving all over the league, right? The Colts have hired Josh McDaniels, which I like that hire for Indy. And I like that hire because First off, if you go to a bad football team, this is not a bad thing entirely. We always wonder, why on earth would you ever go to coach a bad football team? And I'll tell you why you go coach a bad football team. The expectations are low. Right. Like, why would you ever coach the Browns? Well, look at Hugh Jackson. Hugh Jackson has won a single game in 2 years. Can't fire him. Can't fire him. You know it's not his fault. The expectations are so low that one game in 2 years does not get you fired. Yes, that's why you go coach a bad football team. That, and if the bad football team has Andrew Luck on it, and Andrew Luck, the best quarterback prospect since Peyton Manning, if the bad football team has that guy on it, you go do it. Absolutely. And if you're the Colts, it's a no-brainer because Josh McDaniels has been known to be a great quarterbacks coach. And one of the things that the Colts have been missing is the distinct lack of development at the quarterback position. And when Chuck Pagano got injured, he got, I suppose it's a sort of injury, but no, that's not what I meant. But when he got diagnosed with cancer, and he did eventually beat the cancer, and that's good for him. But when he was diagnosed with cancer, Bruce Arians took over as the head coach of that football team. And under Bruce Arians, that's the best we've ever seen Luck, is when a guy that can really develop a quarterback gets the reins of that job. So yeah, Josh McDaniels having a shot at Andrew Luck, absolutely. That's a marriage that makes a ton of sense to me. The Cardinals named Steve Wilks as their new head coach. Now, I'll admit, I don't know that much about Steve Wilks, but I think that the Cardinals think that they have a guy that they like. They've deliberated. They've taken their time with this. They have not rushed through the process. And I like the hire for them. I also like Todd Haley to the Browns because I think Hugh Jackson is a pretty good offensive coordinator, but Hugh Jackson has done something that I think a lot of people do not like. And the thing is when the head coach decides that he's going to be the play caller. Now, it works sometimes. It does, right? Especially on the offensive side of the ball. We've seen teams do it to some degree of success. But there have been more instances where it has not worked than when it has worked, right? Anytime Andy Reid is the play caller, you worry a little bit, right? Because it's just clock mismanagement and everything else. You just worry about Andy Reid. Being a head coach is not necessarily, I'm going to do what my specialty is. Being a head coach is about delegating tasks. You're trying to keep everybody in order. You're trying to impose your personality, your philosophy onto this team, and you do so by hiring a bunch of other coaches, a bunch of other coordinators to handle the different segments of your team, right? And if you do it properly, you're the Patriots. And if you don't do it right, you're the Browns. So Hugh Jackson giving up that play calling, hiring Todd Haley to be the offensive coordinator. Todd Haley is a crazy person, right? Like Todd Haley is kind of nuts and will absolutely coach your team out of a game. But mostly, Todd Haley is good at developing players. He's good at speaking to quarterbacks. He's good at taking risks. And he's really, really good at coming up with imaginative offenses. And I think that if you're the Browns, you need that guy. You need to hire a crazy person. You have no choice. You don't. Your team is bad at a historic level. And despite the fact that they have 2 times as many draft picks as everybody else in the league, they still will be bad next year. That's just the way that this is set up right now. So, yes, I like the hire of Todd Haley to the Browns. I think it's a great hire. Now, I want to get to the Titans because the Titans, to me, are the most fascinating of the bunch here. Mike Vrabel becomes the head coach of the team. And 2 things happen. 1, Dick LeBeau is out because the word on the street, or the better way to say it is the scuttlebutt around the league, is Mike Vrabel and Dick LeBeau don't like each other. Because I didn't think that defense was a problem for the Titans, right? Like, defense was one of the things that I actually liked about this football team when you talk about they consistently show up and play good defensively. They give you a solid effort. They execute pretty well. They do have some weaknesses, but that's more of something you fix in the draft rather than with play calling, because I thought the play calling was fine. But Dick LeBeau's out because Mike Vrabel and Dick LeBeau don't get along. And now Mike Vrabel's the head coach. End of story. But the other thing that's happening is that Mike Vrabel was hired to figure out what to do with Marcus Mariota. And the reason why you know he's hired to do this, by the way, is merely because Marcus Mariota is the quarterback. Anytime you've got a young quarterback at the helm, and he seems to be underdeveloped, right? So yes, Mariota falls under that. I think Andrew Luck does fall into there a little bit, especially coming off that injury. I think Jameis Winston falls into there. If you are hired to be the head coach of the team, your job is to figure out what to do with the quarterback. End of story. Yeah, you have a bunch of other jobs too. That's priority one. What do you do with the quarterback? Especially if he's young. That's the reason Mike Mularkey got fired, right? You want to know why Mike Mularkey got fired, even though he made the playoffs? The team did not improve under him. They go 10-6 year one. They go 9-7 year two. They go 9-7 year three. That is the same team. Nothing changed. And I know that they're drafting well. They're getting more talent. They've added to this team Corey Davis, who played well, Adoree Jackson, who was awesome. I got to see the Titans play at the end of the season, and Adoree Jackson had a big interception that helped put the game on ice. Made a couple of big-time defensive plays, some open field tackles. This is a team that has been developed well. So you can't, from one year to the next, go 9-7 and 9-7 and expect to keep your job. And your quarterback appears to be regressing because you insist on running some arcane nonsense offense. And so Mike Vrabel, despite the fact that he's a linebacker forever and a defensive coordinator and everything else, Mike Vrabel has promised to help develop Marcus Mariota. And so offensive coordinator Matt LaFleur has an interview with the Titans, as well as Chip Kelly. Now, Chip Kelly hasn't actually confirmed that he's going to do the interview, but Chip Kelly's on the table. And that would be fascinating if you could give Chip Kelly Marcus Mariota again. If you could give Chip Kelly Marcus Mariota in the NFL again, listen, that would be fun. That would be absolutely fun. And if you want to talk about a guy playing to your quarterback's strengths, because that's really what the problem is, right? Like when you are looking at a guy and you're saying, well, what is the problem? Why are we trying to force Marcus Mariota to be under center instead of lining up in the gun, which he did a ton of in college and which everyone in the NFL is doing more than you? Like the Titans lined up under center with the quarterback under center more than everybody else in the league. Period. Like there wasn't another team that did that more. So you decided to do the thing that no other NFL team was doing. Now you either are the smartest guy in the league and you know something that everybody else does not, or you're not. You're the dumbest guy in the league, right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you whether or not he was the dumbest guy in the league, but I will say this. When you have a 9-7 record, it's not because you were successful. So I like Vrabel, and I like what Vrabel is trying to do, what Mike Vrabel is trying to do, at least on the offensive side of the ball, is find somebody whom he can trust to not only develop his quarterback, but to play to his quarterback's strengths. And that's smart. That's smart. He's already doing it. He's already learned. Like, here's the thing. You can't be a player under Bill Belichick and learn nothing, right? And Mike Vrabel played for Bill Belichick for 14 years. So he knows one thing at least, which is this. Bill Belichick is better at delegating than anybody in the league. Right? Bill Belichick has lost all kinds of offensive coordinators, all kinds of defensive coordinators. Bill Belichick is a big-time defensive guy, but he doesn't call the defensive plays. His defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, calls the plays. Bill Belichick has learned to be a master of delegation. He's mastered the game plan. He knows how to fundamentally impose his will on the organization so that everybody does their job. Like, there's a whole lot of upside and a whole lot of good reasons why you would hire Mike Vrabel to be your head coach. Because as I mentioned before, the head coach is the CEO. The CEO is good, you're the Patriots. The CEO is bad, you're the Browns. Right? It's all about running the organization so that you have an identity. And I tell you this in marketing and branding all the time. It's like you've got to have an identity. Why should people buy you and not somebody else that does what you do? Right? Like, why does your football team win and not anybody else's, even though everybody else is drafting and everybody else is trying and everybody else is working hard? Why do you keep winning and why are they not winning? Right? Like, that's ultimately the question that you are answering when you hire somebody to be a CEO, or in this case, a head coach. That's the question you're trying to answer. We're all trying. We're all working hard. How do we win while everyone else is losing? Right? You're a CEO. You're good at being a CEO. Well, you're Disney. You're Amazon. You're Google. You're bad at being a CEO. You're one of the many companies that have fallen by the wayside that we've never heard of them. Right? Like, so the penalty is pretty high on this one, especially when you've got a young quarterback. Especially when you've got a young guy at the reins, because you can waste his prime. You don't have that long with him. Like, a run of your typical NFL quarterback is 10, 12 years. Right? Like, you get 20 years of Peyton Manning. You get 20 years of Brett Favre. You get 20 years of Brady. You get, 16, 17 years of Breeze. That's not the norm. That's not normal. Most guys are Donovan McNabb. Really good. Really good. But after about 13, 14 years, it's time to hang it up. Right? Like, most guys aren't one of these freaks that can play for 20 years. It's just not the way that it works. You're listening to all new Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, Clutch with Keon Rose. So I want to talk a little bit of Georgia football here at the end, because I just noticed something. I read an article on dognation.com, and I thought it was really interesting to point out, which is, it's an article by Seth Emerson. And Seth Emerson saw a trend, and it's a really interesting trend. And it's that Georgia quarterbacks have a really good first year, a really good freshman year, and then they get replaced. And it keeps happening. Right? So 2 years ago, Grayson Lambert is the quarterback. And Jacob Eason replaces Grayson Lambert. He takes over week 2. Keeps the starting job, never looks back, and has a really good opening season for Kirby Smart in Georgia. And then last year, Jacob Eason gets injured week 1. Jake Fromm takes over, becomes the starter, and they go all the way to the national title game. Right? Which, for Georgia, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better second year from your head coach. So if the trend continues, we need to pay attention to what's going to happen between Jake Fromm and freshman quarterback Justin Fields, right? Because Jacob Eason is transferred away. Justin Fields is the next quarterback. And I think that's something that people actually were critical of Kirby Smart of last year. That Kirby Smart landed Justin Fields, and people were saying, well, he needs to recruit other positions outside of quarterback, as though he weren't doing that already. Well, no, you just keep getting quarterbacks because you never know if you'll ever need them. Right now, you're a Georgia fan. God forbid anything ever happened to Jake Fromm. Like you know he's solid. You know he's good. But you got Justin Fields. He's a 5-star. And it matters. We'll see what they're going to do as their, third act now? As we get closer to National Signing Day. You're listening to all new Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com. Clutch with Keon Rose. Thank you for joining me today, making me just a small part of your day. You know that I appreciate you. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch.
Truex Jr. is off the pace, and he is headed to the pit lane. Elliott